Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking Arthur C. Clarke's absolute juggernaut of a classic, Childhood's End. We're going to set the stage for a seriously mind-bending journey into human evolution. This book hit the shelves back in 1953, right, when Cold War paranoia was at its absolute peak. But the crazy thing, the existential and philosophical questions it throws at us hit just as hard today. We'll be looking at this masterpiece from a few different angles, really exploring the weird paradoxes of a perfect society and ultimately the heavy price of spiritual growth. Let's get right into it. Now, if you've been on Reddit lately, you might have seen this exact question popping up. And honestly, it's the perfect launchpad for us today. We came across this really interesting thread where someone had just binged the 2015 TV miniseries adaptation, and they were basically asking, hey, is it actually worth reading a book from over 60 years ago if I already know the ending? It's a totally fair question, right? When visual media gives you the whole plot, what is left to get from the original text? Well, the consensus from fans was a massive, resounding yes, but for a very specific reason. People pointed out that while the TV show really leans into emotional drama and weaves in modern political angles, Clarke's original novel does something totally different. It's a fascinating, rather dispassionate deep dive into these gigantic conceptual ideas. Readers love that Clarke isn't trying to manipulate your emotions. Instead, he delivers this potent, fast-paced, idea-driven narrative. It's less about individual characters and much more about the destiny of the entire human species. To really understand why this book has such incredible staying power, let's step away from pop culture for a second and look at some hardcore academic analysis. We're pulling from a fantastic paper published in the Hacettepe University Journal of the Faculty of Letters. This research dives into how Clarke takes the classic alien invasion trope and completely flips it on its head. Instead of a typical apocalyptic threat, he uses the invasion as this brilliant vehicle to explore utopian visions and the inevitable, kind of terrifying dystopian realities that come with them. So, to really get this, we have to define what a utopia actually is. Academically speaking, a utopia is an imaginary society that runs perfectly on principles of harmony, justice, and order. In Childhood's End, this exact flawless system gets imposed on Earth by an alien race we call the Overlords. But here's the catch, and the research really hammers this home. A utopia is inherently a paradox. It translates to a good place, but it also means a no place. Why? Because achieving that level of total perfection almost always demands a rigid, suffocating control that wipes out individual freedom. Let's look at what the Overlords actually do. They show up right at the peak of Cold War tensions, literally right as humanity is holding its finger over the self-destruct button. Acting with complete neutrality, they step in and establish a literal golden age. National borders? Gone. A single world government is established. And humanity witnesses the absolute elimination of disease, poverty, and war. By every historical metric we have, it's the ultimate human dream, finally realized. But man, this is where that dystopian paradox rears its ugly head. Listen to this quote from Clarke. The end of strife and conflict of all kinds had also meant the virtual end of creative art. The academic analysis points out something profound here. Without pain, without struggle, without righteous indignation, human curiosity and artistic drive just flatline. The utopia turns into this incredibly comfortable but completely monotonous existence where science and art just hit a brick wall. The stagnation gets so suffocating that a group of humans actually tries to rebel against it. They create an isolated colony called New Athens, which is designed specifically to reclaim human struggle and art. They even force themselves to experience minor inconveniences again, riding bicycles, cooking their own food in kitchens, just to feel alive. But it completely fails. As it turns out, you simply cannot artificially manufacture the raw, soul-shaping struggles of human history while living inside a bubble of overwhelming, comfortable stagnation. Okay, now we have to talk about the absolute most shocking irony in the book, the Overlords themselves. For 50 years after arriving, they absolutely refuse to show humans what they look like. And when they finally step out of their ships, it's a jaw-dropper. We have to contrast their incredibly benevolent, peaceful actions with their physical appearance. Because humanity's great cosmic saviors, they are towering, leathery-winged, horned creatures. They literally exactly resemble humanity's ancient myth of the devil. And the reason why is explained by the Overlord Corellin. They stayed hidden for half a century because they knew exactly what would happen. If they had shown themselves on day one, humanity would have completely lost its mind in religious panic, convinced that Satan had arrived to, quote, overthrow their gods.
They literally had to wait out the clock until humanity was educated and secular enough to judge them by their peaceful actions, rather than our ancient hardwired superstitions.
Moving right along, let's dive into another incredibly fascinating lens from our academic sources, the parent and child dynamic. The researchers point out that you can read the entire novel as a giant metaphor for spiritual growth. Basically, the overlords are acting as extremely strict, authoritarian parents, and humanity were the reckless toddler needing to be guided out of our very destructive childhood. You can actually map this out as a timeline of humanity's cosmic growth. We start off in childhood, throwing tantrums, playing with the literal fire of nuclear weapons, and clinging to irrational fears. Then the overlords step in and force us into adolescence. This is that 50-year waiting period. It's an era of consolidation where humans unlearn their prejudices and basically get an extended, peaceful education. And all of that is required before we can reach adulthood, which in Clarke's universe means completely transcending physical reality to join a higher entity called the overmind. A massive part of this parenting dynamic is a policy the researchers call the nursery ban. Simply put, the overlords forbid humans from exploring outer space. Period. It's exactly like protective parents putting safety locks on the cabinets to keep dangerous tools away from a toddler. They are intentionally keeping us locked safely in the nursery of Earth so we don't carry our violent, destructive tendencies out into the wider galaxy. We are basically grounded until we grow up. Now, what is really wild about this academic research is how it connects this whole evolutionary arc to Buddhist philosophy. It's fascinating because Arthur C. Clarke was a very vocal, lifelong secularist, right? Yet his narrative maps almost perfectly onto Buddhist teachings regarding spiritual growth and enlightenment. The journey of humanity under the watchful eye of the overlords is essentially a forced, cosmic march toward nirvana. If you look at Buddhist scriptures, the path to true wisdom happens in 3 major stages, and the overlords guide humanity through them step by step. First, you have to master morality, which the aliens enforce by simply ending war, poverty, and crime overnight. Step 2 is embracing contemplation, which is provided by those 50 years of absolute peace and global education. And finally, Step 3 is attaining wisdom, which requires completely letting go of the physical self. But reaching that final stage, it demands a practice of radical non-attachment. The Buddhist scholar Edward Conze puts it perfectly. The belief in a self, which makes us make statements such as I am or I have, is the cause of suffering. To make that final evolutionary leap, humanity literally has to let go of everything. Their material possessions, their cultural egos, and, tragically, even their own physical children. And that brings us to the absolutely gut-wrenching emotional climax of the whole story. The last generation of human children suddenly evolves. They develop telepathic and telekinetic powers, and they shed their human nature entirely. Corellin tries to comfort the terrified, grieving parents by telling them, "For what you have brought into the world may be utterly alien, yet it is something wonderful, and you will have created it." Those parents are forced into the ultimate, heartbreaking act of non-attachment, letting their kids go forever. So what exactly is happening to these kids? Well, they're ascending to merge with the overmind. Based on our academic sources, the overmind is this vast, collective, cosmic consciousness. You can think of it as the sci-fi equivalent of God, or achieving nirvana. And here's the bittersweet truth about the overlords. They are just midwives. They can never actually join the overmind themselves. Their tragic, noble burden is to travel the universe forever, helping other species evolve enough to make the leap that they themselves never can. As these evolved children finally merge with the overmind, their combined psychic energy physically obliterates the Earth. But wait, the framing here is absolutely crucial. This isn't presented as a disaster movie tragedy. Not at all. It's framed as an immense, peaceful, and magnificent fulfillment of humanity's true cosmic potential. It's just the shedding of an old physical shell so the spiritual energy inside can finally return to the cosmos. Childhood is, at long last, over. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. If true growth requires us to eventually abandon the safe, comfortable nursery of our current lives, what worldly attachments are keeping you in your own spiritual childhood? What do we need to leave behind to truly evolve? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer on Childhood's End. I really hope diving into Clarke's incredible universe gave you some big ideas to chew on.